Ready to go!
Alrighty, ladies and gents, welcome to another technical video. We got Ethan, the vampire Edward, whatever, for another session. You guys know it. Reach it 2.0, whatever you want to call him. But we are here to talk about today fingers and lats versus back pressure. Now, fingers and lats for me, just take this proudly sponsored by Pound for Pound Armwrestling Arm Warmers this episode. Off so you can see my arm a bit more, see all the gains I've made. But anyway, fingers and lats. Now, before we grip up, when we talk about fundamentals of arm wrestling, no one mentions finger flexion, where I'm almost convinced that finger flexion is more valuable than wrist flexion. I'm almost convinced.
I'm almost agreeing with you. As a long arm top roller,
like seriously. So just for definition's sake, this for me is finger flexion, this for me is wrist flexion, okay, the difference between the two. Often you'll hear the term cupping. Cupping implies the combination of both of them, okay, but I'm going to break it down in between finger flexion and wrist flexion. So for me, finger flexion is a great way of, it's a really anti-top roller move, it's a real anti-back pressure. Now, especially if someone is taller than you, which Ethan is in this case, you can take a grip in such a way that you're not going to even care to get wrist flexion. You're not trying to get wrist flexion, you're only securing finger flexion. Now straight away that means that you're happy in the start position. You don't need to change anything. If I need wrist flexion, that's obviously a position that I didn't start in, so I need to gain that. But if you are just confident that your fingers can't go, and you set your fingers in a tabletop, which is straight wrist, tabletop fingers, and you're confident that nothing's gonna break that, then you unlock a whole set of technical opportunities. Now, Ethan, you set up like you're loading and you've got height and big back pressure threat in your game. Cool. So typically and traditionally, a lot of people choose to try to climb and fight for height, and it becomes a game of wrist rise, and it becomes a game of pronation threat and an ability to regrip. You can see there, the tall guy often ends up with the high ground in that scenario. Enter finger flexion. We no longer need to climb for height. Now, you've all seen Devin Larratt's King of the Hill illustration, where he really describes you want to be on top of the hill. On top of the hill is where you have control of the match. You can prevent someone from getting further inside, you can prevent someone from climbing up if you're on top. Finger flexion allows you to have control of the top of the hill despite being lower, if you have superior or sufficient finger flexion relative to this opponent's back pressure. Now, because I'm committed to finger flexion, this opponent is committed to rise, I get to use lats. Okay? Now, lats are always stronger than biceps, like by a country friggin' mile they are. Okay, we've got what, Levan doing 72.5 kilos back pressure. Okay, so we all can jump on a rowing machine and pull more than 100 kilos if we're just doing a single row with no threat to our hand. So lats are stronger than biceps. It's very obvious. But in order to access that, you need to have fingers that won't open underneath the threat of back pressure and pronation combined. Back pressure straight, very easy to contain. It's the pronation that makes it a tricky thing. So you need to have whatever, let's say your back pressure is worth what, about 50 kilos when you're aggressive and fresh and going for it. And your pronation on top of that threat with the side pressure threat might add another 5 kilos of effort. So I really need to contain Ethan and use my lats and fingers. I need about 55 kilos worth of ability on my fingers. Now, I personally know that my fingers can handle about 65, 70 kilos like this. So I should have no dramas containing Ethan using this. Now, when Ethan goes for the top roll, and I just use my fingers engaged, you'll see that I'm low on the wrist. I'm not high in the hand, but I'm effectively on top of the hill right now. If Ethan tries the top roll, he fails because I'm on top of the hill. If Ethan tries to hook, I'm in the superior position for rotation, meaning I'm on top of the hill again. So that's the real life demonstration of why and how to apply the stronger fingers. What else do I want to say about this? The thing is, when you let's say a match kind of stops. So Ethan goes, and I'm at my limit here. Okay. Who do you think is in a better position here? I'm gonna say me, because my bicep and brachialis is resting currently. I'm containing using lats and fingers. Now, even though I can't move sideways yet, I believe I'll be able to sit here for much longer than the person who's actively using bicep and brachialis. If this guy is sitting here like that loaded, as long as my fingers don't crack, my lats are gonna outlast this. They really, really are. He has to crack my fingers in order to gain the superior access to side pressure. So you can see here, I would have sat there for another 5 minutes talking, but we stopped because Ethan couldn't maintain that back pressure load continuously. So again, it illustrates another point that if you have sufficient fingers, you can use your lats against someone's bicep. Now, at the moment go for that again. Keep that on as hard as you can for me. Back pressure as hard as you can. Okay, now when he gasses, which is gonna happen in about 10 seconds, keep going. He's maintaining a very good static. And there it goes. It took a while. I was getting worried for a moment there that he was gonna get through. But the point is, when he runs out, there comes an open door opportunity where you get to roll and go sideways essentially for free. And that's because he is now out of position and can't re-establish the connection on the other side of the hill. Fingers, man. Fingers versus wrist flexion. So same thing, if this guy was the top roller and I'm going for wrist flexion instead of just finger containment, it's a much bigger risk. Okay, if I'm going for that, he can tee off with a low hand top roll much more, and if I miss it, I'm open. Okay, for wrist flexion, I needed energy coming forward. For finger flexion, I can go immediately back. Okay, big difference. Some notable arm wrestlers that do this, the most obvious one is Todd Hutchins. Todd Hutchins does not care for wrist flexion from the go. If you go into a hook with Todd, he will come in, but if you're going backwards or outside pressure in any sense, he doesn't care for wrist flexion. He just says, my fingers are locked. He sucks it in with his lats, absorbs your effort, and then pins you. Great example. So for me, it's a wonderful tool. Don't just shoebox yourself into it, but just recognize that fingers and lats is superior to back pressure as long as your fingers can withstand it. So number one way to train this for me is the wrist wrench. Big fat wrist wrench. Just do everything with that. Did I miss anything, Ethan?
Oh, not sure. Maybe just in terms of finger strength and application of chop.
Stack, yes, there we go. From the other perspective of the top roller, it's just as important. Keep going.
Yeah, so in order to get connection through rotation in the low hand top roll, I'm relying on my finger strength to be able to turn Ryan's pronation down, as well as lever my pronation up. So that all hinges on me being able to keep my fingers secure. When my fingers go, I lose all connection to my back pressure again through my lat, and lose all control over wrist flexion as well.
And you've just unlocked a can there that is superior top rolling as opposed to basic level top rolling. And basic top rolling, I always describe it as rise and roll. If you're just rising and rolling, that's only two real major movements that you're asking your opponent to contain. So me rising and rolling, you just hold on, Ethan. Me rising and rolling looks like this, okay? All that's what I'm trying to do. Compared to imparting fingers, so this time I get to add some cup, I get to add some chop, I get to add some rise and some roll. So it's a more complete picture. There's just more threat coming out. So fingers, guys, not only containment, but top roll, hook. If I could add 10% to one movement right now, I think I'd choose fingers.
Yep. And you can use it everywhere too.
Yeah.
Like when you flop wrist press. so much fingers. You know?
Yeah. Fingers, like you said, when you look at the position that we start in arm wrestling, this is where we start. And winning the first movement off the go is so critical, and it will benefit your position and your control from then on. So making this position here as strong as you can, and when you analyze this position, fingers are the most critical thing that are going to be attacked. So if your opponent tries to attack them and they don't move at all, you're in control. You're totally in control. All right, guys. That's it. Go buy your arm warmers. They're out. Go buy your arm warmers.
Yes, that's amazing!